in.
Yes.
And you know that the question we like always to ask is first job and current job. And it's so nerdy that I love that question so much. But I think it's always fun to hear the different stories and kick it off in a lighter way versus the stuffy, let me read your amazing bio.
That's right. So first job, I had 2 first jobs in northern Minnesota in high school. One was a waitress at like a country kitchen. Does anyone know country kitchen?
I don't know.
It's like a Perkins kind of, but it's more local. Anyway, so I was a waitress there.
I feel like everyone needs to be a server at least once in a while.
Oh yeah, I could not agree more.
Yeah.
And then I worked in the kitchen of a nursing home, which comes in very handy when you have to be sanitary. I learned in high school like how to sanitize things.
Oh wow.
So,
yes. And then currently what you're doing.
Currently, so I recently left my career in public policy. So I was in public policy for about 22 something years. And now I am a coach full time, and I specialize in working with women who have anxiety or health issues.
And what I think is interesting and nice tie-in is I feel like you had shared with me that it was sort of a overlapping transition. It wasn't all of a sudden like, I'm working for public policy, cutting it, now I'm doing this. So I think there could be some interesting synergies there.
There was a transition.
You know, so when and kind of how did you make that decision like, it's time to start helping, you know?
Yeah, so it was, so I think, you know, as we get older, things start to converge in our lives, things start to braid together, and you kind of create this cohesive, interesting career. And so I've always been sort of a coach. I've always been the person that people come to for advice or just, you know, to lend an ear, whatever. And I wanted to be a psychologist when I was young.
Oh.
Yeah, and
Anna Marie has her degree in psychology.
There we go.
Yes.
And so I always had that part of me, but I went in a different direction for my career. But the catalyst was the dark years of 2013 to 2016.
Oh, it's funny. I thought you were going to say 2020, but you're right. It's interesting to bring it back to those years.
Yeah. So so by that time I had been struggling with IBS for about Irritable Bowel Syndrome for about 17, 18 years. I got it right before I went to grad school, which was the perfect timing. Not.
Yeah.
And I had a low-level anxiety most of my life, but it came out as perfectionism.
Yeah.
It wasn't your
Nobody
typical...
can relate in this room.
No, so it was perfectionism, it was controlling my environment, it was getting easily frustrated, and...
I hyperfixate on like the stupidest things.
Yeah, and it was, but I wouldn't really have called myself anxious back then. I would just have said, no, I'm a perfectionist and whatever.
I work hard, I'm type A.
I work hard, and I just have to have things just so, and so I've been dealing with that for years and years, but it was 2013 that I got this mystery illness. I didn't know what was going on. I lost weight because I was losing weight and because things were so stressful with my health and then my job, because life likes to pile it on.
Yes.
It was
never one thing.
It was never one thing, and it was like this dark night of the soul where I was literally not wanting to die, but I was wanting a bus to jump the curb and take me out because things were just so bad. I had this horrific insomnia, this panicky anxiety. I had extreme adrenal fatigue. None of the doctors could figure out what was going on. And so it wasn't, I kind of had to double down on my research. So up until that time, I had done a lot of things to manage my anxiety, my IBS, you know, the meditation, therapy, medications, doctors.
And there's such a mind-body connection between the anxiety and your stomach.
For me it was.
Yeah.
For some people
I feel like for me as well.
Yeah, for some people it's headaches, for other people
I get that too, don't worry.
like it's low back pain. There is a way that we manifest anxiety in our bodies. And so for me it was IBS. And I had tried a lot of things in those 20 years that I had those things. But when I got sick, I really had to double down. Spent thousands of dollars trying to find a solution, doing research online, just becoming a sponge. And I finally found some things that worked, and one of those things was called tapping, also known as EFT.
Have you guys ever heard of that?
Yeah, like
And the other was these neuroscience-based principles. The other was these breathing, and through those things, I was able to sort of heal myself.
Wow.
And I promised myself in one of the darkest nights of that 3.5-year period, I'm like, if I get out of this, I will do something to help other people. And it just became this mission of mine that I don't want anyone to go through what I was going through with that health crisis, but also the anxiety and the IBS that I struggled with for so long and had tried so many things to resolve.
Yeah.
I feel like I found things that nobody was talking about, nobody had ever told me, even in all the research I had done, all of the exploring I had done.
Well, and I think anxiety sometimes feels like a taboo topic to talk about, right? I think a lot of business owners, a lot of people struggle with it, but we're just not having these open conversations. And that, I mean, aside from the time of year and various other things, that also might be why people aren't, it's like, ooh, I don't know if I want to talk about that. I don't know if I want to face that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's so important because the physical and mental effects of anxiety are just crushing.
It wears you down, and the thing with anxiety is that you are either the type of person who is very unregulated emotions. Like, those people who are chaotic, they are dramatic.
Oh.
But then there are those of us. There are those of us who are like high achievers.
Okay,
that's the hidden anxiety.
Yeah,
okay.
If you're the perfectionist, if you are the procrastinator, if you're the workaholic, that is usually anxiety, because it's like this running away from energy. Like, something bad is going to happen if I don't do all of these things, or it says something about me if I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tap into the fact that I don't feel worthy underneath.
Well, and for me, stillness stirs a lot. It's like in motion, I can sort of numb to the anxiety just by staying in motion, staying in problem solving.
That's exactly right.
Focus on the next thing I have to do.
And society rewards us for being perfectionists and busy and high achievers and working a lot. So it's this seductive trap that I think we get into. And so when we talk about mindset and attitude more generally, but then you talk about having, anxiety or these other things going on, then it amplifies. But I mean, I think mindset and attitude are just important for everybody to think about. So.
Now, you had said something I think would be interesting. I'm going off the rails of my questions I sent her, so. But this mind-body connection, I heard you say different things, like you said adrenal fatigue. Like, I'm curious, have you guys ever heard that phrase? So you have it, I hadn't.
No, I don't know much about it.
So I'm like curious what that is, like how, I think sometimes for me, I'm so in motion that I'm not able to catch that I'm in this stage of anxiety, and I'm just responding, and then you sort of crash and burn, or you make bad decisions, or whatever it is. So what are the tells, physically and or mentally, to help us kind of get in front of it versus going down that path that ends ugly?
I think everybody has their own owner's manual, and I think that one of the main beautiful things about life is that we uncover what our owner's manual is.
Okay.
There is never one process that we will all go through that will make us whole and feel secure and all this stuff.
Because it's coming from different things.
Yeah, so it's the result of these experiences that we had as children usually that kind of shape who we are. But I think tuning into the physical manifestations, like what is your signature tell?
Hyper focus.
Yeah.
I get really critical and hyper focused on things. When life feels chaotic and you feel like you can't control certain things. You focus on the minutia of things like there's leaves in the lobby, like the things that are very tangible that we all know ultimately is not going to make or break us, but it's just like that's something I can see, that's something I can fix, and then I fixate and trigger.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's yours.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of figure out like what your signature, what
I'm
is
curious,
something that.
do you have anxiety? Do you get anxious?
Well, I have a therapist, which is amazing, and I was going to ask you kind of maybe if you can describe the difference between a coach and a therapist, because I think it's interesting that you are coaching people through this, which I feel like my therapist kind of has done more than, she asked some questions and I talked through it or whatever, but at one point just last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, I had anxiety because my anxiety was gone. I was looking behind my shoulder,
interesting.
Where is it? Because normally I should feel this push of anxiety, but I'm still motivated and I'm still doing all this stuff without that.
So you got to that healthy place and it felt weird.
And it felt weird. So then I was like, well, where's that feeling of anxiousness that I've had for so long?
Yeah.
And now it's not, but it's stress for me. I think I hold stress in my stomach, and I've had stomach aches since I was a kid. I have TMJ in my jaw. All of those things that they're like, what's stressing me out, kid?
Yeah.
Like, I
Well,
don't
and
know.
I'm curious the difference between stress and anxiety, because to me, they're obviously, I do believe different, but to me, they're also kind of synonyms as
Definitely.
well. So like,
Yeah.
I'm curious. Yeah, but let's first answer her question.
Yeah.
I think that is a good question that we get a lot, when dealing with coaches and counselors, and I think it's kind of like a Venn diagram, right?
Sure.
Like I think there is some overlap.
Sure.
I remember getting my master's in counseling, and there was a class called solution-focused therapy. And I can remember sitting in some coaching training, and I was like, wait a minute, this is solution-focused therapy.
Right.
So there is, I think, a crossover, but I'm curious when you think about your work with anxiety, what does it look like to come to you versus what does it look like to go to a counselor?
And
do
maybe
you
someone's
see
more
it-
comfortable saying
Yeah.
I have a coach rather than a therapist.
Yeah,
I don't.
And is
Is
there
that
some
what it is?
crossover? Is there times where it's nice to partner and support, both endeavors, so to speak?
Yeah. So obviously the training is different, like
Sure.
that's a no-brainer. And I think insurance covers therapy, so most people go to therapy and they're used to therapy. For me, the coaching, and then coaching usually involves someone asking a lot of questions, getting you to kind of reflect and come up with your own answers.
Mhm.
I feel like the coaching I do straddles the middle, which is actually really hard. This is why it's been hard to market myself.
Yeah.
Is that in therapy, it's really good at helping you uncover and discover why you may have this anxiety. Why do you have,
Like get to the root cause.
what feels like it's triggering you so that it's causing this anxiety? And then coaching is quote unquote all focused on moving forward and not worrying about the past. I straddle that because the main modality that I use in my coaching is tapping. And what it does is it actually takes those insights that you've gained about why you may be having this automatic anxiety reaction in a certain situation. Maybe it's in small groups, maybe it's presenting, maybe it's when you're in contact with somebody who's in an authority position. Like there's something about it that triggers this anxiety.
Deal with manufacturing.
Exactly. And so what we do through the coaching that I do is we then look at what the roots of that anxiety is. So we do go back in childhood and we actually pull out the emotional charge of all of these early childhood events so that you have a memory of them, but they don't get automatically triggered.
Yeah.
So you're actually doing something with these insights that you have, rather than just kind of talking about them and knowing about them. You actually resolve them, and it's based on this neuroscience principle of memory reconsolidation. It's very geeky.
I love brain stuff.
As
But
all
it's-
us nerds.
Yeah, so it's like what we've learned about the brain is that in 1/5 of a second, so most coaches will say that you have a thought, which then produces a feeling in your body, which then produces an action. That's pretty much wrong. In 1/5 of a second, our brains are constantly pulling in information. In 1/5 of a second, it is creating a judgment or a decision, or it is having a judgment about a certain situation, which then creates the thought. So what do you do about that 1/5 of a second? That is where I try to come in and work on what is the memory that's leading to that 1/5 of a second.
Well, and I've heard a lot about like what fires together wires together.
Yeah.
Right. So the more you are engaging in anxiety in a certain way, the more it just becomes
Right.
this automatic.
It
This
does.
is how I respond to this versus
Right.
creating that stimulus and response and slowing down that 1/5 of a second.
Right, so I think what coaching can do is, and therapy too, like I've gone through therapy, I love it, is it can help you to reframe your experiences. It can help you pause after feeling that anxious feeling. Like for me, I might get like this weird gurgle in my stomach, and rather than like getting anxious about it, I can think about it, but that's a lot of work. And so I like the niche that I have in coaching, which is let's prevent that automatic triggering and activation from even happening. So it's like fix the alignment on the car. Don't just get bigger biceps to keep yourself on the road on the steering wheel.
That's an interesting
Which I think
analogy.
is what a lot of coaching does. It's like let's build up that bicep. I'm like, no, let's fix the alignment so that you're not constantly veering off the road.
So I know some of you know what tapping is to some extent, but if somebody has never heard of tapping and is like, what are you talking about tapping? How do you describe that to someone who's brand new to that concept?
So what tapping is it's using your fingertips to physically tap on different acupuncture points of your body while bringing to mind a negative emotion, a negative memory, a body sensation, and that combination of things, however it happens, it changes the firing of your brain. It's this geeky concept of memory reconsolidation. So it's like all of these memories from our past are actually what are triggering this anxiety, because your anxiety, if you have it, is going to be different than mine.
Yeah.
What triggers my anxiety is never going to be the same as what triggers yours, because we've had these unique experiences as we grew up, as we were young adults, that shaped and taught us how the world was, how we think the world is anyway. So yeah, and so the points are based on traditional Chinese medicine, so acupuncture points, but then there's elements of cognitive behavioral therapy where you kind of bring to mind certain things, but there's something about the combination of the two.
Yeah, I've heard good things.
Yeah,
I've heard it's been life-changing for people. I'm curious, when you're talking about anxiety, and I know you kind of specialize with women and business owners and things like that, like what are some common themes or things that you're seeing that we sometimes do that are counterproductive? Or mistakes, I should say, we make.
Yeah, so life is always going to be filled with anxiety, it's going to be filled with hesitations, it's going to be filled with second guessing. I think the thing that you want to look out for is it draining you? And is it a pattern in your life?
Like, is the anxiety serving you or hurting you?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would necessarily say that anxiety serves us.
But that was one of my questions. I was saying,
Yeah.
I was curious, we're going to jump ahead to my last question. There's a lot of times my anxiety causes problems, right? There's no questions about it. You know, it impacts the people around me, you know, it doesn't make me as productive, I don't sleep.
Right.
But there are definitely times where I think, and Anna Marie and I have talked about this, like our anxiety at times helps us to be that much more organized and be that much more forward thinking.
Right.
And so in some ways it helps me to be successful at times.
Yes.
We talk about if and when anxiety can be both a good thing and a bad thing, but that could be just wrong framing on my standpoint,
Yeah,
or just maybe it's something different than anxiety.
Right. I think the key, being human means having anxiety. Like if you've done any sort of Buddhist study, any meditation, you realize how crazy we all are.
What? Ain't that the truth?
You go on a weekend meditation retreat and you're like, what is going on in my brain? And you learn from meditation teachers that this is normal. You're human.
Don't they call it sometimes like your monkey brain? There's like a prehistoric part of your brain that they call it like your
and the
monkey
crazy things that you think. So
Uh-huh.
having anxiety is part of being human. But for me, I feel like we would do very well and our bodies would benefit if we tried to remove some of that anxiety, that automatic response, because when you use anxiety as fuel, it's a very cheap fuel.
Yeah.
It is not sustainable. And when you get through, I have done this too, when I get into my perfectionist mode, so I feel like I'm irritable bowel syndrome free, I'm anxiety free. What I'm doing right now, I never could have done before 2013 or 14, like even any sort of public speaking, never, I would have never felt comfortable. And I've now presented at the state capitol and facilitated conversations with dozens of state legislators, so
That's amazing.
it can change, but I think that using anxiety as fuel, it's a short-term boost that can get you through situations, but it's very wearing on the body.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because it's a push energy rather than a go with the flow and be excellent and live out your mission. Like it can just be very draining.
Well, and I also wonder if it feeds into that adrenal
fatigue. Yeah.
When you're in that fight or flight stage for too long.
That's exactly what adrenal fatigue is. Whether you have a physical illness or you're high anxiety or you have depression, it just wears on your body. And what your body does is it starts to slow down everything because it's trying to save you. And so for me, I had a hidden infection for 3.5 years that just really drained my body. And a lot of women, especially high achieving women, their body starts slowing down, their thyroid starts slowing down, you aren't sleeping as well, you start gaining weight, you have this rapid heart rate, you don't have the energy you used to, you start getting food intolerances, it's like this cascade of things.
So crazy.
that just because we're pushing ourselves too much. So
well, and I think that you've given some tips, but I'm curious, are there any, and obviously tapping and meeting with a coach is a great tip, right?
Yes.
But for someone who's maybe not ready to pull that trigger and dealing with anxiety, I'm curious I'm always about takeaways. We need to make sure that everyone walks away with something.
So I wrote them down because I'm a nerd.
No, I love nerds.
I didn't want to forget. Okay, so there are some things, there's some like regular coachy things that are actually true. So these are, all these tips are based on neuroscience. So our brains are very bad at holding on to positive experiences, very good at noticing and grabbing onto negative experiences. So one easy thing that you can do to reduce anxiety, but just also if you think about, just pull the lens back on thinking about our mindset and our attitude in general, whether or not we have anxiety, baking in those positive experiences. So if you are experiencing something wonderful, like you're getting an award, you're being recognized, you're having a great conversation right now, like I'm savoring this moment, I'm noticing the leaves, the golden color, the smile on your face, and feeling like how good it feels to share what I love to talk about. So savoring in the moment, but also reflecting back on something, like reflect back on your week or even months later.
Well, that's why, I don't know if you guys were Oprah fans like myself. Oprah always was like, at night, do your 5 gratitudes, whatever it is. I always thought it would sound great in theory, but I can't say I pulled that off.
So it's my second thing. So neuroscience also says that we have to find, it is true that if you, at the end of each night, you find 3 positive things that happened in your day and then why they happened.
Ooh, I like that.
And your role in it.
Like how you helped make that happen.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because
that feels more like something like 3 grateful things. I'm just like, I'm grateful for this, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Like 3. Okay, so 3 positive things and why they happen.
And why they happen, and kind of what role you played. And it could be just
I'm sitting taking notes. I like
I
it.
like
It's a good
that.
tool.
I like
It
that.
feels more fitting with my personality.
Yeah.
Versus like this 5 things.
Yeah.
I like it.
Okay. Focus on progress, not your setbacks. So we all have these big goals, and the brain likes to be rewarded regularly. So we want to always focus on the progress we're making. So like you talked about your business, there are little things that you are making progress on.
But it doesn't feel that way.
It doesn't feel that way. So you have this
Zipper.
goal.
I got the zipper colored shirt.
I got the
Yay!
What role did you play in that?
Well, it's the only one available, so here you go.
Done. I love
so
that.
focus and rewarding yourself. So it is just saying, awesome job, you did great. Somehow rewarding yourself with some sort of good feeling. You can do a fist, like yay.
Well, and I'm trying to get better at that too. I don't know if I'm there yet, but my eye was always on the next prize.
Yes.
So something
you
good,
don't want to gloss over. You can't.
Something good would happen, and I'd be like, okay, now we gotta go to, and I'm trying to sit back and do a better job of saying when bringing recognition and saying like this was really great, or good job on making this happen. Or, I mean, I still have a ways to go, but I'm trying harder to like stop and celebrate those wins.
Yes, perfect. So
and I do feel
neuroscience
like
backs
it helps
that up.
that. Yeah, I feel better, and hopefully they feel better.
Okay, and then just 1 or 2 more. So they have been finding in neuroscience that the more specific and in tune we can be with our emotions, the better. It's called emotional granularity. So it's
all these good new vocab terms.
Yeah, so it is when you're feeling anxious, don't lump it under the word anxiety. Feel into what it really is. I am feeling hesitant. And then if you can also put a because after that, because I'm afraid that people will think what I'm saying right now is stupid. Or they will think, and just being with that, observing it and accepting it. So being more specific about what emotion you're feeling, if you want to add the because on the end of it.
I kind of love the because.
Yeah.
I think what can be challenging for me is the language side of things. Like, I'm curious, what are some of those words that, anxiety is this big umbrella term, right? And what I'm hearing you say is having more specifics. What are some of the terms or feelings that tie under that umbrella? Like,
sure.
Like you said, I'm feeling hesitant. Like, I can hear where hesitant is a potential anxiety word, but then I'd be like, what am I feeling? I'm just feeling anxious,
Right, yeah. So, like, I have clients who will say, depending on the situation, like, I'm terrified, or I'm afraid, I'm scared.
Maybe frustrated?
Yeah, sometimes it's not really anxious, it's frustrated. I'm restless. I mean, it's almost like you could go online and search for a list of words, and it almost helps to go through and be like, oh, that's exactly there's something about pinpointing the exact emotion you're feeling that in itself is so relaxing to your nervous system. Like there's an identification. It's not this amorphous, weird, ghosty thing that is causing these feelings in our bodies. Like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
So it's similar like in therapy when you discover why you might be feeling the way you feel today. Like, oh, right, that time in 5th grade when my teacher humiliated me in front of the chalkboard, in front of the chalkboard.
Well, and I think not only, 5th grade, I think as humans, I don't know about you guys, but it's sometimes so much easier to fixate on the tangible things. Like, I don't know, my boss yelled at me. I don't know, I'm trying to think of something tangible that we all probably have experienced.
Right.
Or, whatever. Traffic sucked today, but it's really, and I'm freaking out about traffic, but really it's not about the traffic.
It's not about
But
traffic.
that's something that's really tangible and something easy to communicate versus I started my day really flustered and I'm feeling anxious about my day.
Yeah.
So therefore traffic's making me crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and even one step further is like, what is, like, put some object to the feeling. So in my stomach, it's like, do I feel it? It's like a ball of yarn or something. You can imagine, or like your necklaces are all just tangled up. Like if I think about that in my stomach, I'm like, oh, okay, so unravel that. Or it's like, or I've got this like blob that just kind of feels like this like blob. And you're like, that's all you can, and you can picture that though. I can picture that that's now a feeling here that now I've put in. Okay, then that's how I sort out that feeling. Because
so it's just like using another sense.
So I like how you like, and it's this is why I'm feeling this because.
Yeah.
I like.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Yeah, because like in the description for this, I wrote about like another difference between therapists and coaches. I mean, I'll just talk about different coaches, and they will talk about like your thoughts and your behaviors. So those are things kind of at the surface, but I feel like we need to get at the beliefs underneath that. What is the belief that's driving the thoughts? So for me and my perfectionism and having to do everything right, having this major to-do list and checking things off the list and feeling accomplished, that what I really discovered was I wasn't worthy of being alive unless I proved and contributed to society, unless I did all of these things, and unless I didn't, I created this harmonious household, whether it was just myself or with my ex-husband.
Yeah.
In my childhood, being the perfect one meant that I didn't have to worry about like my alcoholic father. I could take care of him, and then my mom, who I didn't live with. It's like all of these ways that I learned to cope with life, they carried forward with me, and then, then that gets triggered by the traffic.
Yeah.
So it's never the traffic.
Yeah.
It's what's underneath.
Yeah.
So I think that getting underneath to those beliefs and transforming those naturally changes your thoughts, naturally changes your behaviors. So we're not building up the bicep to keep ourselves on the road. We're dealing with the alignment of the car. So.
Yeah, and something I'm really pushing on my team, which they're probably sick of hearing, so I apologize in advance. There was a guy in St. Louis who is a coach, a mental toughness coach. The Cardinals actually hired him right before the World Series, and they hadn't won a World Series in I don't know how many years, and then he went on to help them win too.
Oh wow.
He's awesome. And his big thing is relentless solution focused versus problem centered thinking. And I think some of the anxiety comes from staying in that problem centered thinking. It's so much easier just to moan and groan about like this happened and I can't believe this happened, blah, 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 and spending all that energy there versus stopping that in its track and saying, what is one thing I can do in the next 60 seconds to try to make this better?
Right. Yeah, and I will push back on what his strategy a little bit, because what we know about the brain is that a well-balanced, well-integrated brain is a happy, healthy brain. And so for those of us who are high achievers, we're always in our thinking networks. We are always problem solving. And even for people who have PTSD, they will not let that daydreamy imagination part of the brain get active, because then that's when the fears come up.
Yeah.
That is when the fantasies come up about what's going to happen in the future. Like, I'm going to bomb this exam, or I'm going to bomb this presentation, or this pitch that I have. And we know that so that's an unbalanced brain.
Sure.
And so you want a balanced brain. you actually want to have your brain feel safe so that you can relax. And so one way to do that is just to be mindful. And so one tip actually from neuroscience is that you actually want to deliberately take breaks 1 to 2 times an hour, the top of the hour, every half hour, 60 seconds. And one effective strategy is to actually yawn, because yawning actually does some really cool biochemical things in your brain. And daydreaming, so getting off of the solution focus, the to-do list, and just allowing yourself to daydream. That is then your vacation from the thinking part of the brain, so that your neurotransmitters can get replenished. And so,
but when you say daydream, you're not necessarily, I want to make sure I understand, you're not necessarily saying continue down this path of woe is me, this stuff is horrible, I'm so upset about this. It's more just this free flowing thinking.
Yeah, and
like letting go.
And you can even seed it, and you can focus on like your values, like what are my deepest values, what contribution do I want to make, and just get into more of a daydreamy kind of imagination state. So yeah.
Well, I've been owning this conversation. Anxiety is something that I'm sure everyone individually experiences differently. I don't know if there's any questions for her. I mean, I still have a couple and or we can wrap it early too. Any questions you guys have? This is your chance.
You know, I have a best girlfriend. We've been friends since we were 12 years old, and we tend to have similar stuff going on, which is great. But she is now seeing some, signs of anxiety in her kids, who are now like a 9th grader. And so given everything that they've gone through, we're like, gosh, it took us 38 years to be able to articulate our feelings. How do you help, these young girls get to the point where they're not where we're at? So is there any thought you have towards, parents helping kids or anything like that, or any of us that, I have nephews and just, something like that might be useful for people to see signs of anxiety in other people.
I'm gonna look up a book while you're talking.
Yeah. Because I get a lot of people who will come up to me after they, I do something like this, or they will just hear, and they'll be like, do you work with kids? I'll say, well, I don't work with anybody under 18, but it's a big problem. I don't know the exact answer. It's not an area that I specialize in. But if I were a parent, knowing what I know, what I would do is, when my child went through a challenging life situation, so it could be a divorce, like a lot of kids have kids of divorce, going through, spending extra time to make sure that they're processing what that means, that they are getting in touch with their emotions, so that the reason we have anxiety as adults, I believe, one of the main reasons, is that we have not processed these events in our lives in a way that releases us from them. So we hold on to them, and they hang out in our subconscious, and they get triggered. So if there is a way to help your child process the divorce, or if you had a fire in your house, or if you, even something as traumatic as being embarrassed by a teacher, spending the time to help them process it, like, what are you feeling right now? What are you feeling in your body? How does that make you feel? What do you think about yourself now? Like, help them get in touch with, what are you thinking about yourself? Because it's then that those ideas are forming that, oh, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart, and those
the stories we tell ourselves.
Those beliefs, those seeds, or those are the seeds. So
one of my favorite authors is Dr. Lisa Damore. She wrote a book. Her first book was called Untangled. It's like the 7 steps to raising a strong daughter. Because my first company was Girls Dreaming Big, and there's so many people who work with high school girls that I'm like, you clearly aren't in the trenches with us. This is in theory and this is reality. She was my first author that I was like, okay, this woman understands kids. Like, she's obviously a teacher or something like that. She went on to, and it was very popular, Untangled. But the book but then her second book, which I have not read, so I cannot speak to, but I've heard good things. It's called Under Pressure: Confronting the Epidemic of Stress and Anxiety in Girls. Because she specifically saw that perfectionism is running rampant, even more so, and starting even younger. So I thought that was great. And Untangled it's called Guiding Teenage Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood. So I really, Dr. Lisa Damore, I tried so hard to get her to come speak a couple different times. She's impressive. So I just want to put that out there. Jenny, it's good to see you. I miss you.
I miss you
Are
too.
you? I don't know if I would guess
Here.
that you have anxiety or not. Are you an anxious
Oh,
person? Okay.
Yeah, I'm a pretty,
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of sometimes. First of all, I apologize.
Oh, no worries. We're
So
just
my
glad to see your
stress thing
face.
was I got here without my laptop and I have a 10 o'clock meeting and
Oh,
I had to have it, so I had to run home. So I apologize.
No, stop. We're just glad to see you.
So my stress thing is like just that cycle of processing it in my brain, listening to myself, hearing it in there, just, you know, churning away on that problem. And being able to just step back and let it go and not, you know, get it out of my active processing because it really is just making it worse.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
So thoughts about like when you get some kind of like, I'm kind of in an overwhelmed situation right now. I've got a lot going on, new client that is like way better stuff than I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So like, I just lay there at night and think about all the ways that I can solve this problem, but it really isn't doing me any good. Like at 10 o'clock at night, that's not what I need to be thinking about, so.
Oh, well, that's good that it's happening at 10. Mine happens at 3.
Well, I know it's 3 too, like I get it to shut off, I fall asleep for a few hours, wake up, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing with you.
Yeah. I mean, so there's lots of techniques that you can learn. Like we all know the techniques like, oh, replace this negative thought with a positive thought, or reflect on a time that you were successful in a similar situation and kind of bring that up into your mind and use your past experiences to boost up your confidence or to help you problem solve. But for me, when I think of things like that, which I think people are missing I think we're kind of missing the boat on like, what is the outcome that you're afraid of? What is the ultimate thing that is really driving your behavior? So when you talk about overwhelm, if you're focusing on this specific client, for example, what is the thing that you're afraid of? That he or she won't like your work or your solutions, or that you won't do things on time, like,
or it means you're not going to be able to be successful.
Right. So
sometimes
then,
I use things to be like, oh, I guess this means Rise is going to die.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's getting underneath. Like, there's a reason you have the overwhelm. The reason your mind is spinning, and so it's trying to find underneath what you said, what you are afraid will happen.
Like worst case scenarios. Kind of playing into what is it that I'm worried might happen.
Yeah. And so kind of looking at that, and because that's like, it's almost like the princess and the pea. Like there's something under the mattress. We're just looking at the superficial things, like my mind is racing and I feel overwhelmed or whatever it is, but there is something that's driving that. So I would ask questions like, okay, if I failed, what would that say about me? What does that say about life? If I'm successful, sometimes it's the opposite. Like, what does that say about me? Or what will have to happen? Because we hold ourselves back. Like we hold ourselves back from being successful.
Oh, for sure.
Because we're afraid that it will mean we have to work really hard. Like, I don't want to work 60 hours a week, so I'm not going to be quite as successful in my coaching business as I really want. Or it just means that I'm going to have money, and people who have money are not good people or something.
There is that message, but I'm glad we have people in this community to help get rid of that message that like money means evil or money means bad choices or changes the value of who I am as a person because I'm trying to make money.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Did she answer your question?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so like, I'd be curious, like, what is the thing that is...
If you're comfortable sharing.
Sorry,
I was like giving people an out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Well, I think there's a few things, like, one, it's just, I don't have the time, like, I only have a certain amount of time, right? I don't wanna work 60 hours a week. I don't wanna work 60 hours a week. I know I can, when I could get this client to a reasonable place, but I don't wanna work 60 hours a week to get there.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna drop the ball on other clients.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course I want to really excel, right? Like I want to do a great job. So it's like that whole balance of like, I'm not gonna be able to do that fantastic job in the number of hours that I want to do it in. So how am I gonna make that happen and let go of the anxiety about all the things that I could or should be doing on the ways that I could, you know, just wow them or fix things.
Isn't it amazing how many times we should ourselves?
Yeah.
But seriously, we do.
It's talk about mindset and attitude. I mean,
Yeah, but no, I only bring that up because I heard myself in what you were saying.
Exactly.
I totally get that.
That's all the time. That's me. Don't shit on me, but I do it all the time.
Oh, easily. It's so much easier to talk about than actually.
Because building a business, like baked in, you're gonna have these stressful times and time periods where you're just overextending yourself. But it's up to us as women who are evolved, and we read self-help books, and we talk to each other, and we support each other. It's up to us to really, like I said before, understand what our owner's manual is and get more specific about what our triggers are, and being more and noticing more about what our patterns are, and then get help for those patterns, because then life just becomes a whole lot easier.
Totally. I think it's really
resolve some of that.
That's where I think a good friend, therapist, or coach comes in and like reminding you when you're slipping in those patterns.
Right, because for me, I don't realize until I've already made damage. Like, I don't realize just how out of it I've been, or how some of my triggers are showing up until I've already created a huge mess. And then it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it is almost writing down, like, okay, these are the signs that I am veering off, because we'll forget, because we're so driven. We have goals, we have things to do, we have missions to accomplish, lives to change, and we almost don't care. Like, I don't care that my body, like, I'm eating like crap, and I haven't exercised, and I don't care that I'm starting to have stomach aches again. We just do it.
Yeah.
And you
I think it's a little bit of founder's disease too.
Yeah.
That makes it interesting.